Well, you the one talking about. I guess
I think your
stuck in the
fake
front row.
eyelashes are messing up.
No,
what you're
ain't
reading.
nothing.
Hold on.
Listen.
Order.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brand John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
Well, we let the cat out of the bag. John Combest wears his fake eyelashes. And you know what? Not too many people knew that, but now at least 4.5 people know that now. So we're in the air.
Well, here's the thing. I think that if you're going to have a fake body part, you might as well start up top, Brad. You have your hairpiece. I have my fake eyelashes. We're covered.
That's John Combest, Combest. Every single day of his life for the past 24 years puts together this incredible list of all the important stuff you should know about what's going on in St. Louis. And man, I had a phone conversation yesterday that would make John Combest's toes curl. His name came up numerous times, but I'm sworn to secrecy.
Oh, Brad, I was thinking about that this morning. And before we leave in A Block, we're going to touch on that because it's one of my favorite things when you come on the air and you say, people were talking to me about you. And it all has to do with how you were primarily raised by your mother. And that's why you engage in a lot of gossip and a lot of, you won't believe what people are saying about you, but I can't tell you. Because men that lack a strong fatherly presence in their house, like if their dad is emotionally absent, even though he was a war hero, they're going to rely on gossip a lot, Brad. So thank you for that.
Mom, do you hear that? Yes, that John Combest. If a woman were your co-host, it'd be a much better show. Mom, you don't listen. How do you know? I just know. If a woman was a co-host, it'd be a much better show. Mom, come on, go back to sleep. Mom's going back to sleep. Okay, John.
I interrupted you, Brad, because you were, and we can get to something that's going to make my toes curl. John would be so mad. I care about what some leathery old bat says about me. Go ahead.
No, actually a young journalist, but that's a whole nother story.
Oh, wow, Brad. I should be so upset about it. Tell me more. Let's get into the top three. It's what people actually care about.
It was all good. Here's the top three.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he brings us into...
In third place...
3 stories today. We'll call them the killer bees. The first one you won't find on johncombest.com because it's a local issue. Dan Borgmeyer has been at the center of controversy in St. Charles. Of course, he is the mayor of St. Charles. Headline from Ethan Colbert of the Post-Dispatch. Organizers, quote, pause, end quote, effort to remove St. Charles mayor from office. The group seeking to oust St. Charles Mayor Dan Borgmeyer has, quote, paused, end quote, signature gathering efforts and is unlikely to resume collecting them. A spokesperson said Tuesday. The citizen-led group has been knocking on doors in residential neighborhoods and canvassing downtown St. Charles in hopes of collecting enough signatures to get the recall issue on the ballot sometime in 2026. The group also created a website, launched a social media page, and in honor of Brad Hildebrand, purchased campaign yard signs and solicited campaign donations. But on Tuesday, Olivia Cross, the group's spokesperson, said the committee was no longer pursuing the recall. And here's her reasoning. People were really nervous about signing the petition. There just became this fear that if you were holding that clipboard and taking signatures, that the mayor would find out. Now, Dan Borgmeyer, in all respects, I think I guess the word would be nonplussed here. He says, my record stands for itself, and I let the process run its course. So Mr. Colbert goes on to point out that it would have taken 11,400 valid signatures from the 57,000 registered voters in St. Charles, and that he goes on to detail some of the things that Dan Borgmeyer has gotten criticism about, the data center at 370, his handling of the plan, especially the revelation that his cousin was the primary landowner of the site, and then also the sale of the Legacy Farms Park along Highway B and the Woodlands Park on Harvest Ridge Drive. So despite all the controversy and the hubbub that started last fall about a recall effort, it appears as though people that are critics of Dan Borgmeyer didn't get their proverbial stuff together enough to oust the mayor.
Okay, now read that line again. Why did they stop? I want to focus on that. Why did they stop collecting signatures? You had one line in there that was very important.
She says, people were really nervous about signing the petition. There just became this fear that if you were holding that clipboard and taking signatures, that the mayor would find out. That was from Olivia Cross, the spokesperson for the group.
You know, that's sort of interesting because I don't know if you know this or not, but Dan's got a bunch of kids, and 3 of his kids are orthopedic surgeons. And Dan has told me on several occasions that if anybody gets out of line in St. Charles County, or in St. Charles City, rather, that he's going to release his 3 orthopedic surgeon kids into the community, and they're going to realign their knees, if you know what I'm saying, John.
Oh, yeah, a little kneecap, a little patella rearrangement there.
I'm kidding. That line is so bogus. You know the real reason? The real reason is they couldn't get enough.
Why is that? Are you skeptical?
Yes.
Are you skeptical of what Ms. Cross says?
John, as a seasoned public relations guy, seasoned comms guy, seasoned PR flack, don't you find her reasoning or her statement a little bit suspect?
I think that, well, there's 2 things I think that I would take issue with what Ms. Cross says. The first is that she's calling it a pause, but she says that the group has officially stopped. So you can either cancel something or you can pause it, but you can't do both. So I think it would be a little bit more credible if the group said, we're pausing the signature gathering effort. And if she does go on to say, we're going to continue to remain vigilant about things that go on. And then secondly, Brad, I think the word is, with all due respect to Ms. Cross, the word here is cope. Like, they weren't able to get the signatures. Now they're kind of coping with the fact that, okay, maybe people either aren't as mad at Borgmeyer as we hoped, or maybe people just don't care about what's going on in St. Charles.
Isn't the underlying tone of what she said that somehow that Dan Borgmeyer may be using Tony Soprano tactics? Isn't that sort of the underlying sentiment of what she's saying?
Yeah, I don't know if she's suggesting that he might threaten them physically, but maybe her suggestion here is that people just don't want to go on the record as criticizing the mayor as long as he's in charge of anything in St. Charles.
Man, I know Dan not well, but he's an easygoing guy. The thing that I don't like what he's done, I don't like the fact that they're building a new city hall. First off, you've been in St. Charles, you can't get on 2nd Street. Most of the time it's closed off now because of the fact that the city hall is going to sit right on 2nd Street, which according to Bill Eigel is Main Street, but that's a whole nother story. But I just, do you know the city hall? You know what I'm talking about? Have you seen that city hall?
It's the one, didn't it used to be? Well, that's where I park when I go to, who's the gay little elf that you talk to? Jack Frost. When I go down for that thing, I believe I park at the city hall, and then, because didn't that used to be the St. Charles County offices, or am I mistaken?
No, it was built for the city. It's a very modern building. It's got glass walls. They're gold. And it's the building's probably, 30, 40 years old. It looks like it was built last week. It's a very modern looking building. And they keep talking about, see, there's a parallel, and nothing against Dan Borgmeyer, the people in St. Charles. There's a parallel between the St. Charles City Hall and the St. Louis County Government Building with our friend Dr. Page, who's saying, we have to leave the building. It's going to fall down. And, the whole thing comes down to, remember, we talked about this a couple months ago. The whole thing came down to that the fire code has changed in Clayton, and they have to upgrade the fire suppression systems, the alarm systems, and stuff like that. They don't have to rebuild the building. The building was built like in the 60s. Once again, John, we go to Jefferson City. How old's that Capitol building in Jefferson City? How old is it, John?
I think it was just built last year. I think the Hoffmans built it last year.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
The second B in our 3 Bs today is Bayer. And a big announcement yesterday. This was covered by the Post-Dispatch, by Reuters, by a number of global outlets. The headline from Dana Reek of the Post-Dispatch, $7.25 billion settlement pitched in Bayer's Roundup case. St. Louis court to review. So Bayer and I guess the plaintiff's attorneys decided that they will handle that in St. Louis. I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's the lead from Dana Reek. Agrochemical giant Bayer has agreed to a proposed $7.25 billion class action settlement, a big step toward resolving thousands of lawsuits claiming that exposure to the weed killer Roundup caused non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Monday's proposed settlement would pay people across the United States exposed to Roundup and diagnosed with the cancer, that's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and also those exposed and diagnosed in the future. The settlement would have the company make annual payments for up to 21 years. And the main line here is from the group who's seeking the settlement. This proposed settlement represents a historic step toward bringing justice and financial relief to thousands of people across the country who develop non-Hodgkin lymphoma after exposure to Roundup. And for their part, the company says, look, and I'm paraphrasing here. Actually, I'll give the direct quote. The proposed class settlement agreement, together with the Supreme Court case about Bayer being able to dismiss cases against it, we can get into that in a second, provides an essential path out of the litigation uncertainty. So essentially, Bill Anderson from Bayer had a call yesterday. Bayer had an investor call yesterday that was open to the public and employees and everyone. And they're essentially saying, look, I'm paraphrasing here, we're going to take a big hit with this, but at least we'll have some certainty about everybody that's claiming health damages from our products, and we'll be able to move forward. So if you're Bayer, I wouldn't call this good news, but it's like getting a bad diagnosis and knowing, okay, at least we know what the downside is going to be.
I have to tell you something. Just yesterday, I was in a store and I walked by, here it is February and already the stores are gearing up for spring. I walked by an end cap display of a bunch of Monsanto, are just the Roundup. And it was the version that supposedly kills weeds and then keeps the weeds away for like 4 months. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, it has a residual action, yeah.
Right. And being that I have been educated into the many aspects of Roundup by Mr. Expert in Roundup, John Combest, I decided, okay, I wonder what additional chemicals they have in this that makes it, different from the standard Roundup that just kills the weeds. And as I turned over the bottle, I looked at the back and it said it's made by Monsanto. It doesn't say anything about Bayer. Is that old stock, or is the Monsanto name still a current used trade name?
Yeah, it's still the Monsanto company is still an entity that exists. Now, you might say that Bayer wanted to keep the Monsanto name around so that it could very clearly delineate what was a Roundup brand agricultural herbicide or lawn and garden herbicide. In other words, I think Bayer wanted to keep it around so that it could have the Monsanto name over there and say, hey, that's Monsanto stuff. Now, Brad, you frequently point out that you could go to Lowe's and Home Depot and buy glyphosate today.
It's everywhere.
I should point out, and I fail to point this out every time you bring up your anecdote because, sometimes when you talk to older folks, you just kind of let them go and you don't interrupt. But like Bayer has stopped selling glyphosate and its Roundup formulations for lawn and garden for years now. So whenever you saw that had the Roundup name on it, it didn't have glyphosate in it. Farmers can still buy Bayer products with glyphosate in it. But Bayer removed glyphosate from the LNG stuff, the lawn and garden stuff, years ago just to limit its exposure.
So what's in it?
Well, other types of herbicide, other type of non-select. It depends on the formulation. And other companies still sell lawn and garden products that have glyphosate, the active ingredient, in it. But Bayer's Roundup doesn't have the stuff that you buy for your lawn and garden at Lowe's and Home Depot doesn't have glyphosate in it anymore. It just has other non-selective herbicides. And then as the one you described that would keep weeds, that it would have a residual action over a period of time, that's probably a selective herbicide that will leave grass in your yard but kill undesirable plants.
Well, maybe I like the undesirable plants, but I don't like the grass. Then what do I use?
Well, here's what you do. What you do is you go and you get some toxic soil at that house that you just built off of Cade's Cove, and you just sprinkle it over whatever other lawn, and you got it. And it's about time for our third B of the day.
The number one.
The third B in our trifecta is Boeing. And Secretary of War Pete Hegseth will travel to Missouri today for the Arsenal of Freedom tour. Now, you will only find one brief story about this on my website today. It's from KMOV, and I don't link to press releases, Brad. I'm not some generic, non-attended RSS type website that just spits out press releases. So I didn't link to the press release today, but I'll read you what it says. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth will depart tomorrow, that means this morning, for St. Louis, Missouri, pardon me, to visit Boeing and administer the oath of enlistment to new recruits at the Naval Reserve Officer Recruiting Station. The point of going to Boeing is that the message will emphasize that our national security and the peace of the world move at the speed of our defense industrial base. That's the DIB, Defense Industrial Base, and rely on the hard work of our American workforce. So good old Pete is going to swing by Boeing, probably take a little tour, probably have some people explain what some of the manufacturing and planes are doing. And then I guess Pete will probably get out of here at some point today.
So hold on a minute. I'm finishing up my little Debbie.
I bet you are, Brad.
Are you a fan of Pete Hegseth?
I'm a fan of the fact that he doesn't shove little Debbie's down his gullet when he should be doing work. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's going to ask him a question and he's going to be chugging a Mountain Dew and saying, huh?
Well,
yeah.
That's...
I know that some people, how do you feel about him, Brett?
You know, I think he's going a little bit too far. I read an article the other day that he's forcing out a guy who's been a colonel, and if you read the guy's record, it's like Rambo reincarnated. But apparently he's not on the same plane as Pete Hegseth. He's a colonel, and if you know the way that things work, the ranks in the Army, the colonel is the last rank before one-star general. And this guy is on the list of being a one-star general to be promoted, and Hegseth has blocked his promotion. And they say it's all philosophical. I don't like that. I think that if you got a company and you got some people who are really hard workers and really doing well for the company, but they may not be totally down with your philosophical ideas, that's not a reason for not promoting them. Get what I'm saying, John?
I do, but kind of it's you serve at the privilege of whoever is their patronage jobs, aren't they?
No,
I mean,
no.
you serve at the privilege of whoever is the boss, don't you?
Well, in the military, sort of yes, sort of no. I mean, because of the fact that it's not like the president where you can just say, "Okay, you're out of here." I mean, it's a little bit different than that. You can be demoted, you can be reassigned, and that's essentially what they're doing. They're reassigning the guy, and apparently they're taking his name off the list of people to be promoted. And my dad talked about this. My dad was a captain, and he talked about the fact that he could never become a major. And I go, why is that? And we used to talk about this kind of stuff. And he says, well, the colonel doesn't like me. Okay. Well, aren't you good at your job? He was in the Corps of Engineers when he was, was in the reserves after World War II. And, he would say, I do very good at my job, but the colonel doesn't like me. Simple, and once again,
and don't you think, Brett, with all due respect to your dad, anyone who's ever been passed over for a promotion anywhere, you could be at Energizer or Enterprise, or you could be your dad, isn't a common cope to that to say, well, they just don't like me. I speak my mind. They just don't like me. Maybe you're just not that good at your job.
Well, could be. I mean, could very well be. But the point being is that it's. I always get this confused. Subjective and objective. Which ones you lose objectivity? So in other words, if the colonel says to my dad, "Hey, you're not going to earn anything more than a captain," that's it. Is that being subjective or objective?
Yeah, you're being subjective because you're not being objective. Would be him looking at your dad's scores on aptitude tests and such. But
right.
Subjective is you're using your own analysis.
Well, see, when I worked for the police department, there were people who should have been promoted to lieutenant who weren't, and some of the screw-ups were promoted to lieutenant. And, okay, that's the opposite, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're overlooking the fact that at Boeing today, Cori Bush is announcing one of her endorsement deals. She did a deal with NovoNordisk. It's called Bozimpic.
Don't you find it fascinating that she goes from wanting to close down Boeing to now, supporting Boeing? Isn't that? Did somebody take her aside and say, Cori, listen to me. The largest employer in your district is Boeing. The largest employer in North County is Boeing. What are you doing going after Boeing? You know what I mean?
I don't know, Brad. I think it sounds like APAC has gotten to you. That's what I think. I think it sounds like you're shilling for some shekels over there.
No.
It sounds like your old North County Jewish girlfriend. What was her name? Ira Goldstein?
No. Phyllis Quint. Phyllis Quint. I still remember
Phyllis
her.
Quint.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, we made quite a pair because at the time I was a full 6'2", and I think she was 4'11". So there was a little bit of difference in height there. Okay, John, you ready for some commercials and then
I want some B block coming up.
And then some B block coming up. Okay, here we go.